The silence in my house was the first thing that hit you. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a hollow one, the kind that echoes with the ghosts of conversations and the memory of a life that wasn't mine anymore. My ex-husband, Mark, had taken the oversized leather furniture, the massive flat-screen TV, and the sense of cluttered, noisy life that had once filled the space. He'd left me with the mortgage on our modest suburban colonial, my third-grade teacher's salary, and this deafening quiet. For a year, I'd tried to fill it. I joined a book club, took up pottery, and even suffered through a disastrous 3-week stint in a hot yoga class. Nothing worked. The emptiness wasn't just in the house, it was in me. I was a teacher, a nurturer by trade, and I had no one to nurture. That's why, on a rainy Tuesday in October, I found myself on the phone with Mrs. Gable from the County Department of Children and Family Services. "He's a good boy, Maria," she was saying, her voice a little staticky over the line. "Just quiet. He's been through a lot. His mother passed away from a sudden illness about 6 months ago. No other known relatives have come forward. Leo. His name was Leo. He was 8 years old. The file she'd emailed me had a single grainy school picture. He had a mop of dark brown hair that fell into his serious dark eyes. He wasn't smiling. My heart ached just looking at him. I understand it's a big step, especially with your recent changes, Mrs. Gable said, her professional tone softening with a hint of genuine sympathy. My divorce is final. The house is mine. I have a stable job, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I was trying to convince myself as much as her. I have a spare room. It's empty. The word hung in the air between us. An empty room in an empty house. It felt like a sign. "We can arrange for him to come this Friday," she said, sensing my surrender. "Just for the weekend, to start. To see how it feels for everyone." When I hung up, I walked upstairs to the spare room. It was painted a sterile beige, filled with boxes of Mark's things he hadn't bothered to collect. For the next 3 days, I worked like a woman possessed. I hauled the boxes to the curb, painted the walls a calming sky blue, and assembled a simple wooden bed and a small desk. I bought Star Wars sheets, a bookshelf that I filled with my childhood favorites, and a soft rug shaped like the Millennium Falcon. I was building a sanctuary, a place where a quiet little boy might feel safe. Friday afternoon, a county sedan pulled into my driveway. Mrs. Gable got out of the driver's side, a kind smile on her face. Then she opened the back door. Leo emerged slowly, clutching a worn brown backpack to his chest, as if it were a shield. He was smaller than I'd imagined, and his eyes darted around the manicured lawns of my quiet street, taking in everything and nothing at all. "Leo, this is Maria," Mrs. Gable said gently. I knelt, trying not to loom over him. "Hi, Leo. I'm so glad to meet you." He didn't respond. He just stared at a spot somewhere over my left shoulder. I led them inside, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I showed him his room. He walked in, dropped his backpack by the door, and stood perfectly still in the center of the Millennium Falcon rug, his small frame looking lost beneath the blue walls. "Well," Mrs. Gable said brightly after a tour of the house, "I'll leave you two to get acquainted. I'll be back on Sunday evening." The front door clicked shut, and the silence I was so used to came rushing back, only now it was different. It was charged with the presence of this silent, wounded child. I made us grilled cheese and tomato soup for dinner. He ate 3 bites of the sandwich and drank all the soup without a word. The entire weekend was a string of silent moments. We watched movies, we built a Lego set, and I read to him before bed. He'd listen, his expression unreadable, and then curl into a tight ball under the covers. On Sunday evening, just before Mrs. Gable was due to arrive, we were sitting on the living room floor, working on a puzzle. "You don't have to go back," I said softly, not looking at him. "You can stay, if you want." He didn't look up from the puzzle piece in his hand, a corner of blue sky. He was quiet for so long, I thought he hadn't heard me. Then, in a voice so small I almost missed it, he said, "Okay." It was the first word he'd spoken directly to me, A simple okay that felt like a symphony. I felt a crack in the hollowness inside me. And for the first time in over a year, a little bit of light shone in. I knew in that moment that this was right. This was my purpose. I didn't know then that this single beautiful word would set me on a collision course with the one person who had always specialized in destroying my happiness. My sister, Jessica. The first few weeks with Leo were a delicate dance of advance and retreat. I learned that he hated loud noises, that he loved drawing intricate pictures of spaceships, and that he had nightmares that left him tangled in his sheets, slick with a cold sweat. He wouldn't talk about them, but I'd sit on the edge of his bed, humming softly until his breathing evened out. We were building a fragile trust, brick by silent brick. He started calling me Maria. He started leaving his bedroom door open a crack at night. He even smiled once, a quick, fleeting flash of light when my attempt at a pancake flip sent it splatting onto the kitchen floor. I was so focused on our little world that I'd managed to forget about the outside one. That blissful ignorance ended with a single, imperious knock on my front door a month after Leo arrived. My sister Jessica stood on my porch, wrapped in a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair didn't have a single strand out of place, and her lips were painted a severe, judgmental red. "Maria," she said, her tone a masterclass in condescension. She breezed past me into the foyer, her expensive perfume instantly colonizing the air. "I had to hear from Mother that you've taken in some project. You didn't think to call me?" "Hello, Jessica. It's good to see you, too," I said, closing the door. "He's not a project. His name is Leo." Her eyes, a shade of blue as cold as a winter lake, scanned my modest living room with undisguised disdain. "Right, Leo. Honestly, Maria, what are you thinking? After everything with Mark, you should be focusing on yourself, getting your life back on track, not saddling yourself with a charity case." The words hit me like a slap. I felt the familiar heat of anger and shame rise in my cheeks. It was Jessica's special talent, to take something good and pure and twist it into something pathetic. "It's not like that," I said, my voice tight. "He's a wonderful kid who needed a home. I had a home to give. You have a two-bedroom house you can barely afford, and the emotional stability of a Jenga tower," she sniffed, pulling off her leather gloves. "And what do you know about raising a troubled child? My Ashley is in advanced placement everything, and Brandon is already the star of his Pee Wee soccer league. That takes resources, Maria. Time, energy, and, let's be honest, money. Things you are notably short on." Just then, the subject of our conversation appeared at the top of the stairs. Leo stood there in his stocking feet, holding one of his spaceship drawings. He froze when he saw Jessica, his eyes wide and scared. Jessica's gaze flickered up to him, and her expression soured, as if she'd found a bug in her Chardonnay. "Oh, there he is." She didn't even try to smile. "Leo, this is my sister Jessica," I said, forcing a warmth into my voice that I didn't feel. "Jessica, this is Leo." Leo clutched his drawing and said nothing. Jessica gave him a cursory up-and-down glance, and then looked back at me, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "See? He's completely shut down. You're in over your head." Whisper. "What happens when he acts out? What do you really know about his background? His parents could have been drug addicts, criminals." "His mother was a nurse who died of cancer," I snapped, my voice sharp. "And his father isn't in the picture. That's all you need to know." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. "Well, aren't you the fierce little mother hen? Don't come crying to me or Mom and Dad when this all blows up in your face. Robert and I are hosting the family Thanksgiving this year, by the way. You two are, of course, invited. But perhaps it would be better if you came alone. We wouldn't want the boy to be overwhelmed." I stared at her, dumbfounded. She wasn't just being cruel. She was trying to isolate me, to shame me into hiding Leo away. "No, Jessica," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "We are a package deal. If Leo isn't welcome, then neither am I." She let out a long, theatrical sigh. "Fine. But if he breaks one of my crystal vases, the replacement cost is coming out of your Christmas present." She turned, her coat swirling around her. and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut, leaving the cloying scent of her perfume and the poison of her words behind. I looked up and saw Leo still standing at the top of the stairs. A single tear was tracing a path down his cheek. He'd heard every word. I ran up the stairs and wrapped my arms around his small, trembling body. He buried his face in my shoulder, his drawing crinkling between us. "She's wrong," I whispered into his hair, my heart breaking for him. "This is your home. You are not a charity case. You are family." He didn't say anything, but he held on to me tighter. As I stood there, holding this child who had already lost so much, a cold, hard resolve settled in my soul. I would not let my sister, with all her money and her malice, break this. I would not let her break him. This wasn't about me anymore. This was a fight for him, and it was a fight I had no intention of losing. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were a fragile truce. Leo and I settled into a comfortable routine of school, homework, and quiet evenings. He started talking more, asking questions about the stars, and telling me about his day. The nightmares lessened. He was slowly, cautiously, beginning to heal. My house no longer felt empty. It felt full of a quiet, budding hope. My hope, however, was no match for Jessica's mansion. Pulling up to her sprawling faux Tuscan villa on Thanksgiving Day felt like arriving at a hostile embassy. Every window blazed with light, and a fleet of luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Robert, Jessica's husband, a man whose spine seemed to have been surgically removed and replaced with a dollar sign, greeted us at the door with a flimsy handshake. "Maria!" "And, the little guy," he said, his eyes flicking nervously toward Jessica, who was gliding across the marble foyer. "Leo," I said, my hand resting protectively on Leo's shoulder. "His name is Leo." Leo shrank behind me, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the place and the cacophony of loud conversations and clinking glasses. Jessica's home wasn't just a house. It was a statement. Every surface was polished, every decoration professionally placed. It was a sterile, soulless performance of wealth. "Maria, darling," Jessica cooed, air kissing the space beside my cheek. She barely acknowledged Leo, instead steering me toward the living room where my parents and a dozen of her high society friends were gathered. "Get yourself a drink. You look stressed." The afternoon was an exercise in humiliation. Every conversation I tried to have was expertly diverted by Jessica. When our aunt asked how I was enjoying having Leo, Jessica cut in with a booming laugh. "Oh, Maria's just a saint, isn't she? Taking on such a challenge. I keep telling her she needs to think about her own future, but she's always been the bleeding heart of the family." Her friends, a pack of women with tight faces and expensive jewelry, murmured in what they probably thought was sympathetic agreement. Expensive jewelry. To me, it sounded like the clucking of vultures. They looked at Leo, who was sitting quietly in a corner, trying to read a book he'd brought, with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. The final, brutal blow came at dinner. We were all seated around a dining table that could have hosted the Last Supper. Jessica, at the head of the table, raised her wineglass. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice ringing with false sincerity. "To family, to those who are with us, and to those who are less fortunate." Her eyes landed on me. "And to my dear sister, Maria, for showing us all what true charity is. It takes a special kind of person to put their entire life on hold for a complete stranger." The table fell silent. I could feel every eye on me. My face burned with a shame so hot it felt like it could melt glass. It was a perfectly crafted insult, wrapped in the guise of a compliment. She had reduced my love for Leo, our burgeoning family, to a public spectacle of my pity and poverty. I looked at Leo. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on his plate. He was trying to make himself invisible. My heart shattered. I had brought him here, to this place, and let him be hurt. Something inside me snapped. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowing her insults, and enduring her casual cruelty, came to a boil. I placed my napkin deliberately on the table and stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice, when it came out, was steady. "You're right, Jessica," I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence. It does take a special kind of person. It takes someone who understands that a family isn't built on a stock portfolio or the square footage of a house. It's built on love, on showing up, on protecting each other. I looked directly at her. Leo is not a stranger. He is not a charity case. He is my son, and I will not sit here and let you use him as a prop to make yourself feel superior. I walked over to Leo and gently took his hand. Come on, sweetie, we're going home. Jessica's face was a mask of fury. Maria, don't you dare make a scene. A scene? I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. You mean like publicly humiliating a child and his mother in front of 20 people? No, I'll leave the scene-making to the expert. I didn't wait for a response. I walked Leo out of that cold, cavernous house, past the stunned faces of Jessica's friends and the weak, useless expression on Robert's. As the heavy oak door closed behind us, I felt a profound sense of release. I had finally stood up to her. In the car, Leo was silent. I glanced over at him. He was looking out the window, his small chin trembling. I'm sorry, Leo, I whispered. I should never have taken you there. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes shining with unshed tears. You called me your son, he said, his voice barely audible. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of awe. I did, I said, my own eyes filling. Because that's what you are. He reached out his small hand and placed it on my arm on the center console. We drove the rest of the way home in a comfortable, healing silence. I had lost a battle with my sister, but in that car, holding hands with my son, I knew I was winning the war. The Thanksgiving incident created a rift in the family, a chasm Jessica had dug, and I had refused to cross. My mother called, wringing her hands metaphorically through the phone line, pleading with me to be the bigger person and apologize. Apologize for what, Mom? I asked, my patience worn thin. For defending my child? Well, you know how Jessica is, she'd sighed, a familiar refrain I'd heard my whole life. It was code for, Jessica is awful, but she's rich and successful, so we all have to pretend she isn't. I stopped taking their calls. My focus was on Leo. The confrontation, as painful as it was, had solidified our bond. He started calling me Mom sometimes, tentatively at first, as if trying on a new word. Each time he said it, my heart swelled. We were becoming a real family. He was thriving in school, making friends, and the ghosts in his eyes were finally starting to recede. One crisp afternoon in early spring, as I was sorting through a pile of mail, I found a thick, cream-colored envelope addressed to me from a law firm. Abernathy, Cole, and Finch. My stomach twisted. Legal letters, in my experience, never brought good news. I thought of Mark, of the divorce, of mounting bills. With trembling hands, I tore it open. It wasn't about me, though. It was about Leo. The letter was from a Mr. Abernathy, informing me that as Leo's legal foster parent, I was required to be present for the finalization of his case. It stated that the formal adoption hearing was scheduled for May 15th. This was the news I'd been waiting for, the official step to make our family permanent. A wave of relief washed over me. But there was another paragraph. Furthermore, please be advised that we are in possession of a sealed file pertaining to the deceased, Ms. Sarah Miller, Leo's mother. The contents of this file, as per Ms. Miller's explicit written instructions, are to be unsealed and read into the record only at the final adoption hearing by the presiding judge. This was a condition of her last will and testament. A cold knot of anxiety formed in my gut. A secret. What kind of secret could Sarah Miller have left behind? I thought of Jessica's venomous words. His parents could have been criminals. I pushed the thought away. It didn't matter. Leo was Leo. His past didn't define the bright, wonderful boy he was becoming. Still, a sense of foreboding lingered. That evening, I got an unexpected call from Mrs. Gable. Maria, I just wanted to touch base, she said, her voice warm. I received the notice about the hearing date. We're all so thrilled for you and Leo. Our final report couldn't be more glowing. You've given him a wonderful, stable home. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. That means the world to me, I said. I hesitated, then decided to ask. The letter mentioned a sealed file from his mother. Do you know anything about that? There was a pause on the other end of the line. It's unusual, she admitted. Typically, all pertinent information is shared with the foster family from the outset. But this was handled by her private attorney and sealed by court order upon her death. It's legally out of our hands. Whatever it is, the court will handle it. I wouldn't worry too much. But I did worry. The unknown felt like a storm cloud on the horizon of our perfect day. A few days later, there was an incident at school. I got a call from the principal. Leo had gotten into a fight. My heart sank. When I arrived at the school, I found him sitting in the office, his lips swollen and a defiant glare on his face. Another boy, a bigger fourth grader named Kyle, was sniffling in the opposite corner. The principal explained that Kyle had been teasing Leo on the playground, calling him an orphan and a foster freak. Leo had warned him to stop, and when he didn't, Leo had shoved him. On the car ride home, Leo was silent, staring out the window. You know you're not supposed to shove people, sweetie, I said gently. He said I don't have a real mom, Leo mumbled, his voice thick with emotion. He said you were just getting paid to keep me, like a babysitter. I pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face him. You look at me, Leo. Is that what you think? His eyes filled with tears. But what if the judge says I can't stay? What if he takes me away? The letter, the secret file. His fear and my own anxiety collided. He was afraid of losing the only home he'd known, and I was terrified of some unknown revelation that could tear it all apart. I unbuckled my seatbelt and pulled him into a hug, right there in the car. Listen to me, I said, my voice fierce. Nothing in that letter, nothing anyone says, is going to change the fact that I am your mother and you are my son. I will fight for you with everything I have. No one is taking you away from me. Do you understand? He nodded against my shoulder, his small body relaxing in my arms. I held him, stroking his hair, my mind racing. This adoption wasn't just a formality anymore. It was a battle. And the letter from Mr. Say's just a formality. Abernathy's office felt like the first shot being fired. The formal notice of the adoption hearing seemed to be the catalyst Jessica was waiting for. Realizing she couldn't bully me into abandoning Leo, she changed tactics. She began a quiet, insidious campaign of whispers, aimed at poisoning the well and painting me as an unstable, unfit guardian. It started with a phone call from my mother. Maria, dear, she began, her voice strained. Jessica was just telling me, well, she's worried about you. She said that little boy got into a fight at school. She seems to think he's becoming violent. My blood ran cold. How would Jessica know about that? Oh, she has friends everywhere. One of the other mothers on the PTA, I think. She's just concerned, dear. Concerned that you're not equipped to handle a child with behavioral issues. He was defending himself, Mom. Another boy was bullying him, calling him an orphan. Well, yes, but violence is never the answer, she tutted, completely missing the point. Jessica had twisted the story, framing Leo as the aggressor, and me as the incompetent parent, unable to control him. A few days later, the other shoe dropped. I received a call from Mrs. Gable. Her tone was professional, but edged with an unmistakable weariness. Maria, we've received an anonymous tip on the Child Services Hotline, she said. A concerned citizen reported that they believe Leo is in an unstable environment. They mentioned shouting, emotional distress. They even implied you might be drinking. I gasped, feeling the air leave my lungs. The accusation was so vile, so far from the truth, that I was momentarily speechless. I never raised my voice to Leo, and I barely drank at all, save for a rare glass of wine. That's a lie, I stammered. A complete and utter fabrication. It's my sister. It has to be her. I believe you, Maria, Mrs. Gable said, and I could have cried with relief. Your record is spotless, and my home visits have shown nothing but a loving, supportive environment. But protocol is protocol. I have to come out and do an unscheduled wellness check. I'm so sorry. The next day, Mrs. Gable came by. She was kind and apologetic, but the entire process was deeply humiliating. She inspected my refrigerator, checked my cupboards for liquor, and spoke to Leo alone in his room. I sat at my kitchen table, my hands clenched into fists, feeling violated and furious. Leo, to his credit, was a rock. When Mrs. Gable asked him if he felt safe with me, he looked her right in the eye. "She's my mom," he said with a simple finality that left no room for doubt. The visit ended with Mrs. Gable reassuring me that the complaint was baseless and would be dismissed. But the damage was done. Jessica had shown me how far she was willing to go. She wasn't just trying to hurt me anymore. She was trying to take my son away. The pressure mounted. My father called, his voice gruff with disapproval, telling me I was tearing the family apart by alienating Jessica. Her friends would give me icy stares if I ran into them at the grocery store. I felt like I was living under a microscope, with every action being judged and distorted. The stress began to take its toll. I was exhausted, sleeping poorly, and constantly on edge. Through it all, Leo was my anchor. He seemed to understand, in his own intuitive way, that we were under siege. He became more affectionate, leaving his drawings on my pillow and offering to help with dinner. Our small two-person family became an impenetrable fortress against the outside world. One evening, about a week before the hearing, I was tucking him into bed. "Why does she hate us so much?" he asked quietly, his voice small in the dim light of his room. He didn't have to say who she was. I sat on the edge of his bed and took his hand. I wanted to give him a simple answer, but there wasn't one. Took his hand. "I don't think she hates you, sweetie," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I think she's unhappy. And sometimes, when people are very unhappy, they try to make everyone else feel as bad as they do. It's not about you. It's about her." "But she's rich," he said, a note of genuine confusion in his voice. "She has a big house and a fancy car. Why would she be unhappy?" I smoothed the hair back from his forehead. "Leo, the things that make you rich on the inside, like kindness and love and courage, you can't buy those. And I think she's very poor in those things." He seemed to ponder that for a moment. "We're rich then," he stated. A lump formed in my throat. "Yeah, kiddo," I whispered. "We're billionaires." He smiled, a genuine, sleepy smile, and closed his eyes. I watched him for a long time, this boy who had taught me the true meaning of wealth. Jessica could call her lawyers and her society friends. She could whisper her poison into every ear that would listen, but she couldn't touch what Leo and I had. We had built our fortune on something far more valuable than money, and I would take that fortune to court and fight for it with my last breath. The day before the hearing was thick with a nervous, electric tension. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm, heavy and expectant. I had taken the day off from work, wanting to spend it with Leo, to wrap him in a bubble of normalcy before our world was put on trial. We spent the morning at the park, throwing a frisbee until our arms ached. We ate lunch at his favorite pizza place, getting extra pepperoni. We did everything we normally did, but underneath it all ran a current of unspoken anxiety. I saw it in the way Leo's eyes kept darting toward me, as if for reassurance, and he felt it in the way my smiles didn't quite reach my eyes. That evening, I made his favorite meal, spaghetti and meatballs. As we sat at the kitchen table, the silence stretched, filled only with the sound of our forks scraping against the plates. "Are you scared about tomorrow?" Leo asked, finally breaking the quiet. He was pushing a meatball around his plate with his fork. I put my own fork down and looked at him. There was no point in lying. "A little," I admitted. "Are you?" He nodded, not meeting my gaze. What if the letter says something bad? What if the judge reads it and changes his mind?" This was the fear that had been gnawing at me for weeks. The mysterious sealed letter from his mother, a ghost at our table. "Hey!" I reached across the table and covered his small hand with mine. "Look at me." He slowly raised his eyes to meet mine. They were filled with a profound and heavy worry that no 8-year-old should ever have to carry. It doesn't matter what's in that letter, I said, my voice low and firm. It's just words on paper. It can't change the last 8 months. It can't change this. I squeezed his hand. It can't change the fact that I love you more than anything in the world. You are my son. Tomorrow, we're just going to a stuffy room to have a man in a black robe sign a piece of paper that makes it official to everyone else. But for you and me, it's already official. It has been for a long time. A tear escaped from his eye and rolled down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away with the back of his other hand. I love you too, Mom. My heart ached with a fierce, protective love. I got up, went over to his chair, and knelt beside him, wrapping him in a hug. He leaned into me, his small body surrendering to the embrace. We stayed like that for a long time, a silent promise passing between us. We were a team. We would face tomorrow together. After I tucked him in bed, I sat in the living room, the house dark and quiet around me. I went over my own testimony in my head, the answers I'd give to the judge's questions. I thought about what I would wear, wanting to look responsible, stable. Every detail felt monumental. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text message. It was from Jessica. I hadn't heard from her directly since her campaign of whispers had begun. My thumb hovered over the screen, a sense of dread washing over me. I finally opened it. Heard the big day is tomorrow. I'll be there. To offer my support, of course. Families should stick together during difficult times. The message was chilling. The words support and family dripped with venom. She wasn't coming to support me. She was coming to watch me fail. She was coming for the spectacle, hoping to witness the moment the judge uncovered some horrible secret and deemed me unfit, proving her right all along. She wanted a front-row seat to my destruction. For a moment, pure, unadulterated fear shot through me. What if she won? What if her whispers, combined with some unknown bombshell in that letter, were enough to sway the judge? What if I lost him? I closed my eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and thought of Leo's face. I thought of him saying, "We're rich then." I would not let her win. I would not let fear win. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, my resolve hardening into steel. I deleted her message without replying. Tomorrow wasn't about Jessica. It wasn't about the letter, or my parents, or the lies. Tomorrow was about Leo. It was the day I officially became a mother, and no storm she could conjure would stop it. The courtroom was smaller and more subdued than I'd expected. It was furnished in dark, imposing wood that seemed to absorb all the light and sound. I sat at a long table with my court-appointed lawyer, a kind but overwhelmed woman named Ms. Davies. Leo sat beside me, his small hand clutching mine, his feet barely touching the floor. He wore a little navy blue blazer I'd bought him for the occasion. He looked like a miniature man, trying to be brave. Across the aisle, just as she'd promised, sat Jessica. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored gray suit, looking every bit the powerful executive. She was a vulture in couture, perched and waiting. Her husband, Robert, sat beside her, looking pale and uncomfortable, his eyes fixed on the floor. My parents were there too, huddled behind them, their faces a mixture of anxiety and disapproval. The hearing began. The judge, a stern-looking man with silver hair named Judge Miller, reviewed the files. Mrs. Gable gave a glowing report from DCFS, recommending the adoption without reservation. Ms. Davies asked me a series of standard questions about my ability to provide for Leo, and I answered them with a clear, steady voice, my eyes focused on the judge. Everything was going smoothly. I could feel a sliver of hope. Maybe the letter was just a formality. Then, the judge cleared his throat. "That brings us to the final matter," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "The court is in possession of a sealed document, left in the care of Attorney John Abernathy, to be opened upon this hearing. It is the final statement of the deceased, Sarah Miller." A court clerk, a balding man in a rumpled suit, handed the judge a thick, cream-colored envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I squeezed Leo's hand, and he squeezed back, a small, desperate act of solidarity. Judge Miller broke the wax seal with a small knife. The sound seemed to crackle through the silent room. He unfolded the pages and began to read. To the honorable judge presiding over my son's future, he began, his voice flat and professional. My name is Sarah Miller. If you are reading this, it means I have lost my battle with cancer, and my sweet boy, Leo, is alone. I pray he has found a home with someone kind, someone who sees the light in him, as I always have. The judge paused, and I saw a flicker of something human in his eyes. He continued, there are things I must set right, secrets I have kept to protect my son, but which he now needs for his protection. I was a nurse at St. Jude's Medical Center. 10 years ago, I had a brief, regrettable affair with a wealthy, married man who was a benefactor of the hospital. He told me he was unhappy, that his marriage was a business arrangement. I was young, and I believed him. When I discovered I was pregnant, he panicked. He gave me money, a lot of it, on the condition that I disappear and never reveal his identity. He was terrified of his wife, of the scandal it would cause. I could feel Jessica's eyes burning into the side of my head. I didn't dare look at her. My own heart was pounding. The judge continued reading from the letter. He set up a trust for Leo, a substantial one, but I never touched it. I wanted to raise my son on my own, but I always knew that if something happened to me, this truth was the only real protection he would have. The name of Leo's father is Robert Calloway. A collective gasp went through the room. My head snapped toward my sister. Robert Calloway, my brother-in-law, Jessica's husband. The color drained from Jessica's face, leaving a ghastly, chalk-white mask. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Robert shrank in his seat, his face ashen, finally looking up from the floor with the eyes of a condemned man. My own mind was reeling. Leo wasn't just a foster child, he was my nephew, Jessica's nephew. The judge wasn't finished. He read the final, devastating paragraph. Robert's wife, Jessica Calloway, learned of my existence about a year before my diagnosis. She did not tell her husband. Instead, she had her lawyers contact me. They offered me more money to remain silent, to ensure my son would never be a threat to her perfect family or their inheritance. She knew Robert had a son. She knew, and she did everything in her power to keep him hidden, to erase him. I am leaving this letter to ensure she can never erase him again. Leo is not just an heir to the Calloway family trust. He is Robert's firstborn son. He is entitled to his name, his heritage, and his birthright. The room was utterly silent. The truth of it all crashed down on me. Jessica's cruelty, her obsession with getting rid of Leo, her phrase charity case, it wasn't just snobbery. It was a calculated, vicious campaign to keep her husband's secret buried. She wasn't afraid of me taking on a foster child. She was terrified of her husband's past walking through her front door. Jessica finally found her voice. This is a lie, a fabrication from a gold digging. Silence! Judge Miller's voice boomed like a gavel. He fixed his steely gaze on Robert. Mr. Calloway, is this statement true? Are you the father of this boy? Robert Calloway, a man who had lived his life in the shadow of his wife's ambition, finally broke. He buried his face in his hands and gave a single pathetic nod. The judge looked from Robert's slumped form to Jessica's horrified face, and then to me. His expression was one of profound disgust for them and a new, deep respect for me. Then he looked at Leo, who was staring at Robert with wide, confused eyes. The judge's face softened. Son, he said, his voice now gentle, it seems you have a lot more family than you thought. He turned back to me, a final, resolute decision on his face. Ms. Jensen, in light of these extraordinary revelations, your commitment to this child is all the more remarkable. The court finds it is unequivocally in the best interest of the child, Leo Miller, soon to be Leo Jensen, that this adoption be finalized immediately. He banged his gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot, signaling the end of one life and the beginning of another. I turned to Leo, my eyes blurred with tears, and pulled him into my arms. He was mine. He was officially, legally, and irrevocably my son. As I held him, I looked over his head at my sister. Her perfect, curated world had just been shattered into a million pieces on the floor of a public courtroom. And for the first time, I saw her for what she truly was. Not powerful, not intimidating, but a small, pathetic, and deeply impoverished woman. The aftermath was a slow-motion explosion. Jessica didn't scream or rage in the courtroom. She simply imploded, her face crumbling as she stared at the ruins of her life. She gave me one look of pure, unadulterated hatred before turning and walking stiffly out of the courtroom, her husband trailing behind her like a ghost. My parents scurried after them, casting confused, apologetic glances in my direction. They had chosen their side long ago. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. Mr. Abernathy, the lawyer from the letter, became our fierce advocate. The Calloway Family Trust, which Jessica had guarded so jealously, was pried open. It was revealed that Jessica had been systematically hiding assets from Robert for years, preparing for a future that didn't include him or any inconvenient truths. The revelation of Leo's existence, combined with her financial deceptions, gave Robert the leverage he never knew he had. Their divorce was headline news in the small, gossipy world of the local elite. It was messy, public, and utterly devastating for Jessica. Her carefully constructed image was shattered. She was no longer the powerful CEO's wife. She was the woman whose husband had a secret love child, a secret she had known about and tried to bury. Her society friends, the same women who had looked down on me, abandoned her instantly. Scandal was a stain they wouldn't risk getting on their designer clothes. In the end, Jessica was punished in the only language she understood: money and status. The court awarded a significant portion of the Calloway fortune directly to a new trust for Leo, managed by an independent trustee until he turned 21. Robert, finally free from her, settled the rest with her in a way that left her comfortable, but nowhere near the level of power and influence she once wielded. She was forced to sell the Tuscan villa. She lost her seat on the charity boards. She became a pariah, a living cautionary tale whispered about at the very garden parties she used to host. Robert, for his part, tried to connect with Leo. He was clumsy and awkward, a man crippled by decades of weakness. Leo was polite but distant. He didn't need a father, he had a mother. After a few stilted visits, Robert seemed to understand. He respected the boundary, ensuring the trust was well managed and sending extravagant, impersonal birthday gifts that Leo would politely thank him for before putting them away. None of that mattered to me. The money was a safety net, an assurance that Leo would have opportunities I could never have given him. But it wasn't our life. Our life was in our small, quiet house, which no longer felt empty. It was full of laughter now, full of the sounds of Leo practicing the guitar he'd always wanted, the smell of my terrible attempts at baking, and the comfortable silence of two people who belonged together. We didn't move. We didn't change. I still taught third grade, and Leo still went to the same school. The only difference was the weight that had been lifted from our shoulders. The money gave us freedom, the freedom not to worry. We took a trip to California one summer to see the giant redwood trees. We went to space camp in Alabama. We did the things I had only dreamed of, but the best moments were still the small ones. One Saturday afternoon, about a year after the hearing, I was in the garden, trying to coax some life out of my tomato plants. Leo came outside and sat on the steps of the back porch, watching me. He was taller now, his face losing its boyish roundness. "Mom?" he said. "Yeah, sweetie?" "Do you ever think about them?" he asked. Them was our unspoken code for Jessica and Robert. I stopped what I was doing and sat on the grass, wiping the dirt from my hands onto my jeans. "Sometimes," I admitted, "it's hard not to." "Are you sad that your sister doesn't talk to you anymore?" I considered the question honestly. I thought of the years of being belittled, of feeling small and inadequate in her presence. "No," I said, and the truth of the word surprised me with its simplicity. "I'm sad that I never really had a sister to begin with, the person I thought she was. She was never really there." He nodded, accepting that. "I'm glad it was you," he said softly. "I'm glad you were the one who came to get me." My heart felt so full it might burst. I smiled at him, a real, genuine smile that reached every corner of my soul. Me too, kiddo, I said. Me too. He came over and sat next to me on the grass, leaning his head on my shoulder. We sat there for a long time, watching the sun dip below the rooftops of our quiet suburban street. The air was warm, the world was peaceful, and my son was safe beside me. Jessica had tried to brand me a charity case, someone defined by what I lacked. But sitting there, with Leo's head on my shoulder, surrounded by the life we had built, I knew the truth. We were the rich ones. We always had been,